Today we're looking at Birmingham Pen Company's Frank Gorshin Riddle Green. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Birmingham Pen Company's Frank Gorshin Riddle Green is a green ink. Now, I normally don't do this, but I'm going to say, as I've researched actually every single one of the Birmingham pens, because I was so interested in the history of why they name them, the most interesting thing to me that came along about Frank Gorshin is that he was a heavy, in-character actor. He would not leave character the entire time he played a role. And all I could think was what a nightmare that must be when he played the Riddler. If he had to do that for like a week straight of filming, and you had to be around him as the Riddler all the time. Oh my God, that would drive me crazy. But he was fantastic as an actor. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into a different pen for day. I then put it into a Noodler's nib creeper to take my notes for this video. Now, before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is a chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately dunk it into water. And what we see is it flees up the page. It gives us this kind of brown across the bottom with little orangey bits at the very bottom of it, and a nice dark blue on top. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And it doesn't travel as far, and it largely looks the same. It makes me feel that this particular ink isn't going to have any real resistance and hold on once we put it down on the page. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, but more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pens. Looking at the highlighter, what we see is the capital H did have the spot that it smeared out. That being said, with all of the writing, it did not feather and spread to the point that it becomes illegible, which makes it perfectly acceptable to use in a note-taking situation so you don't lose anything important. Now, water, I put a drop down for 30 seconds on the paper, and it reactivates and lifts most of this ink up off the page. It's only some of the kind of light browns, almost the only sepia in this ink truly that shows up. We see it in a chromatography nowhere else, which is good because it's green, but we see this kind of light brownish green left where the water was. Now, Pen Flush does everything that water does and a little bit more. It's not completely obvious, but when you look around the edges of where the Pen Flush was, we start to see the white of the paper. This means if water's not enough to get it all out of your pens, and based on that one little spot for 30 seconds, I believe it will be. If it's not, Pen Flush should do everything that you need. Bleach, although there should be no need for it, will completely obliterate it. Just make sure that you flush it completely out, even though there should be no need to use bleach to get this out of your pen. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Birmingham Pen Company's Frank Gorshin Riddle Green has a viscosity of 1.67, which makes it very wet. It's in the red, man. It's green, it's in the red. This is a very wet ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairefontaine, Tumway River, and Rhodia paper with the extra fine and medium nibs. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Birmingham Pen Company's Frank Gorshin Riddle Green has an average dry time of 5 seconds. Holy moly, that's fast. This might be one of the fastest drying inks I've used. Amazing. They should probably call this one a fast dry. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form. And to not beat a dead horse, make sure that you have a safe ink environment. To keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Now, something you may notice is I don't compare inks as here's a this color and this color right next to it that looks the same. I don't, particularly care for doing that. But I'm looking at these inks very close to each other in time frame. And so I went and I pulled out the old one, the Forbes Field Green, to the Frank Gorshin Riddle Green. And I went through the writing samples. I'm going to go ahead and do this review. And what I'm going to tell you is, I just feel like what I got is the same green, either mislabeled or they use the same green twice with two names. Let's see here. Pull this up again. I'll say this at least. I mean, the chromatographies are different. It's a different ink. But, boy oh boy, the end result ink is the same. It's just, without the chromatography, I would have really thought this is the same ink. Clairefontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does give light bits of color variation throughout. It goes from a dark to a darker. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 4 seconds to dry. The medium is a noticeably darker tone with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 6 seconds to dry. The scrubby shows us no color variation in either. The smear test shows we're likely going to be able to recover it. Let's look at Tomoe River. With Tomoe River, we get no bleeding. We do get ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread. It does have halo. It has no sheen. It offers almost no shading. Only a couple spots that look a little darker, and that's about it. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It takes 7 seconds to dry. The medium's a noticeably darker tone with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us that there's no color variation, and we didn't get any color variation. The smear test says you likely can't recover, and I'm gonna believe that. Rhodia. Rhodia gives no bleeding, no ghosting. That spot that's at a scrubby where I put it on stupid thick. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. Extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 5 seconds to dry. I am just really disappointed by how much like the Forbes Field this looks. I'm going to go ahead and pull that up again because I am just so incredibly disappointed. Alright, I guess I can feel a little bit better. It is a noticeably darker tone throughout. So I'll let off on them a little bit. I'll let off on some of my disappointment because it is a noticeably darker tone the whole way through. But without putting those samples directly on each other, we're just not able to see it. I'm going to back off. It's my fault. It's a noticeably darker tone. Okay. Medium, very dark tone. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 8 seconds to dry. The scrubby shows us no color variation in either. We didn't get any color variation. And the smear test says you could likely recover it. Looking at Levenger paper. Levenger paper gives us no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine and noticeably darker tone with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and 4 seconds to dry. Now a very, very, very dark tone with the medium, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and only 6 seconds to dry for it being so dark here. The scrubby for both show us no color variation, and we didn't get any, and the smear test says you could likely recover it. Now, black and red paper. Black and red gave no bleeding and no ghosting.
The 1.1 had no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does have some spots of shading. The K in Frank is a little bit darker. The O in Gorshin is a little bit darker, like the top of the G there is a little darker. We see the same thing happen in the G here. It's a bit darker at the top, lighter at the point, darker at the loop at the bottom on the G. So we do get some color variation in the 1.1. The extra fine becomes a noticeably darker tone with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 3 seconds to dry. That super, super dark tone on the medium, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and 4 seconds to dry. So this ink dries very fast on the black and red paper. It is a worthwhile for there with students that like using this paper. The extra fine and the medium both show us no color variation, the scrubbies, and we didn't get any color variation. And the smear test, I don't think you would be able to recover it if you smeared this while you were writing with it. And that's all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Birmingham Pen Company's Frank Gorshin Riddle Green, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I've chosen Noodler's Habanero because it is a great orangey red. It's very bright, which will offset this very dusty green. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Birmingham Pen Company's Frank Gorshin Riddle Green? Everything about the ink seems to be fine, with the exception of one glaring, constant problem. It looks and performs almost exactly like Forbes Field Green. Now, I don't do swab comparisons on inks because I would hate to have a favorite ink and find out that 19 other manufacturers make it and it's exactly the same. If you like it, love it as it is. Why beat it up? This just, like, when I first looked at it, I was like, that's Forbes Field Green. And that made me very disappointed and not want this, which is a shame because I loved him as the Riddler. As much as I said it would be a nightmare, if I had a time machine, I would love to go back and experience that. Just let me use the time machine once. That's what I would do with it. Everybody's got a different goal in life. Thanks for watching.